Bears Nation. Bears Nation.
Start with the past. There's nothing you can do to change it, so throw it out. Take out the trash. The trash is anything that is keeping you from the only thing that matters.
See you in the Super Bowl.
It's Bears Nation
Podcast.
I don't want them to gain another yard.
It's off by Mac. You blitz all night. Mac will take it all the way in for a touchdown.
It's time for the Bears Nation Podcast with your hosts, Kevin Lapka.
That's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him.
And Jake Hassan.
What I'd really like to do is put the greatness of this man in perspective.
Phenomenally good.
Okay, guys, show us what you got.
Bears Nation Podcast. It is March 23rd. It is Wednesday. It has been a while since myself and Kevin Lapka have been back hosting together. Kevin's wearing a Dodgers hat, which for some reason he thinks is going to get him canceled. I don't know. It's weird. Wear whatever you want. Who cares? It's a Bears podcast. Nobody cares about what baseball team you like or what hat you wear. It's a hat. Who cares? Anyway, Bears Nation Podcast. Been a while. Lots to talk about today. Signings, trades, cuts, things of that nature. We'll get into it. Kevin Lapka, how we doing? Cool. Kevin's just going to decide to be frozen. That's awesome. It's a really great start for what we want to do. Yep. Just completely. There you go.
Am I back?
Hey, buddy.
Am I back?
Hey, buddy.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Low connection here. Actually, my apartment building has had some like service outages, so hopefully it goes through. But yeah, man, let's talk it. The moves have been subtle, and aside from the trade of Cleomac, everything else has been like
there's been some cuts. There's a failed physical.
But we're not talking about anything groundbreaking here. Nothing's breaking the internet. Again, aside from the Cleomac trade. So, but we're gonna break it down. We'll grade it. We'll have some fun. It's good to be back with Jake as usual. So let's do it.
Yeah. So we'll start there. We'll start with free agency that opened a couple weeks ago. We will get into Kevin attending Ohio State's pro day and talking to Chris Olave, but we will start with the guys that are already in the pros, and we'll start with free agency. The Bears, the big move. Admittedly, there was supposed to be a big move, not groundbreaking, but it was a big move. It was a multi-year contract for a lot of money. Defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi was supposed to be a 3-year deal, tens of millions of dollars, came from the Super Bowl appearing Cincinnati Bengals and failed his physical. I think it was ankle or foot, right?
Foot.
Something like that.
Foot.
Yeah, his foot injury because he injured himself earlier in the postseason, I think, right? It was in the Raiders game.
Yeah.
And he was coming off a career year. Looked like a piece that the Bears could have used, especially to anchor the new transition into Matt Eberflus's defense, but fails his physical, ends up not signing. The Bears decide to part ways with him. Wasn't a great start to the Ryan Poles era. A lot of people were cooking Ryan Poles on social media, especially Twitter, about that one. But it's not like he decided to sign the guy. He said, you know what? We're not going to take that risk. You failed the physical. We'll go elsewhere, and we'll get into who ended up taking that spot. But, I mean, Kevin, your thoughts initially on this signing and then failed physical and then not signing of Larry Ogunjobi?
Well, it's not Ryan Poles' fault he failed the physical. Like,
Sure.
I see people on Twitter who are like, what is he doing? Like, fired. Like, there are people calling for his head. Like for that and for just the lack of moves that have been made, it's not his fault that he failed the physical. You thought the guy would be healthy. He takes the physical, and then you take.
And that's why you do the
action.
physical in the first
exactly.
place.
That's why you do it. So I mean, and like this wasn't. I wasn't out of my jumping for joy for Larry Ogunjobi. Like it was a solid depth. It wasn't depth signing. He'd be a starter. He was a solid piece, but I'm not going to lose my mind over the fact that they're not signing him because he failed a physical. Like if anything, all right, let's move on. Let's go find other players to bring into the room. And they've done that, but it is unfortunate. He was a piece who I thought was exactly what they wanted in the Bears defense. He was nasty. He was tough. He fit that Matt Eberflus type player. But that identity of toughness, quick, fast, really gritty has been displayed in almost all of the free agents that they have gotten. So I'm not going to overreact to the fact that this guy failed the physical. It's done with. Let's not talk about it too much. Let's move on. There's different guys you have to bring in the building. And quite frankly, I know we're like 2 weeks into free agency now. and the Bears fans are underwhelmed. There are still guys who are out there, but I'm not upset with the pieces they have gotten. But I know there are Bears fans who are waiting to see the bigger names that they recognize on the screen, on their Twitter feed from Adam Schefter each day. You might just have to wait on it. Sometimes that's how it goes. And there's guys I think they could have been in the market for that they weren't really in the market for, which kind of surprised me. But I'm not going to get too reactionary right now about it.
Well, you have to remember that Ryan Poles said we're not going to take these big swings in the first wave of free agency. And then we were surprised
That's true.
because the Larry Ogunjobi signing was announced on the first, like the minute that free agency officially, I mean, really, if you want to call the 2-day tampering period, the opening of free agency, because that's when deals get announced anyway. You get the Schefter tweets on that Monday anyway. And that's when it was announced basically right away when the tampering period opened. It was like, oh, the Bears are going to plan to sign this guy. And everyone was surprised because Poles had been saying, all right, we're going to wait till that second, third wave. And he had come out of the gate firing with a 3-year contract on a guy that you were expecting. And that was called a good signing around the league. And then instead you don't sign him. And you instead get Justin Jones from the Chargers. You sign him away on a 2-year deal, which is fine. Not as productive of a player, but also was graded as a kind of claimed or proclaimed, I guess, a move that was good for the Bears and a guy who's younger. And if he stays healthy, can fit that same type of mold, but underwhelming. I think let's to circle back to that. Yeah. I mean, Bears fans obviously are, they always want more. Oh, Bears fans typically want more and more and more, and they always want more activity.
Always.
And especially because there's a lot of Bears fans that they know that we're staring down a year that's probably going to be a 500 year, if that. And it's kind of a retool year at best, if not staring down the barrel of a full-on rebuild. And a lot of people don't like that, especially with Justin Fields on his rookie contract. And you kind of figure you got to take advantage of that when you can. It sucks. Yeah, I mean, nobody's getting excited by Equimonious St. Brown or
Equinemius or Equimonious. I think
it's whatever.
Equinemius.
You get the point.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. He's going to have
Dakota
like
Dozier, and there's people who are up in arms. Like Kevin said, there's a lot of guys to still come. And to be fair, I do like some of the signings that the Bears did make. And starting with one of those that just popped on the screen, Byron P Pringle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a guy who
signing.
You bring from Kansas City, had his best year of his career last year in Kansas City. Now, obviously, going from Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid to the unproven Justin Fields and Matt Eberflus, not as great, but Byron Pringle is young. He has shown traits of being a good wide receiver. He's probably not a number one. Darnell Mooney's probably not a number one. Most likely, you have 2 really good number 2s. Mm-hmm. And maybe they can take a jump forward to be a number one or both of them. Who knows? But Byron Pringle is at least a name that people recognize.
Yeah, I mean, he had 598 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. Like he's been a solid player. But let me tell you, before we break down each of these players, let me just kind of tell you what I think is going through the mind of Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, the Bears brass, about how they're approaching free agency. Like, in the past, if you think about the Bears free agency of like past years, like I'm talking about like even before Pace, like it felt like they would grab like a big name player who was 33, whose years past their prime and has their worst years ahead of them. And that's why I'm looking at this approach from the Bears and I'm thinking, okay, every one of these guys that you have signed are under 20 or under 30. All right. They're all 25, 26, 28.
For the most part. Yeah.
Like they're all under 30. And what really good teams do is they get younger players who have their best years ahead of them, and they develop those players and turn them into something more valuable than they are. Like you are looking forward instead of looking backwards by getting younger players who maybe don't have the same accolades and the same stats as certain veteran players who are recognizable names. But in 3 years, Lucas Patrick will be a recognizable name. In 3 years, Nicholas Morrow might be a more recognizable name instead of someone who's extremely recognizable, but in 3 years, they're out of the league. And I feel like, this was the case last year. Did the Bears have the oldest roster in the NFL last year or near the oldest? It was damn near. Close. Yeah. It was near. And that's what I'm talking about. Like guys like Jimmy Graham, Akeem Hicks fit that mold as far as, what it was this year. Like they would go out and, a name that pops in to my mind from like a while ago is like Jared Allen, right? Like that's just the type of things that they were doing. They were going after older players who have done it before, but have nothing else, like are not going to get better with the team. And when you think about the identity of Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus was, we want to build through the draft. It's like, obviously not every player on your roster is going to be a player you drafted, but you want younger players who you are going to be able to develop over time and who you hope to be here for more than just 1 year. If it is just a 1 year contract, because you develop them, they play on a 1 year contract and they get better. That's the hope. So I do feel underwhelmed to an extent. Like, how can you not, right? Like you look at the names that have gone by and you're like, man, like, did the Bears even put up an offer for Juju Smith-Schuster? Like, I know that's not, people have mixed opinions on him, but you have to support Justin Fields and put a support staff there in one way or another. But also the way I'm looking at this, like I just detailed, is I don't mind their approach as far as younger players, faster players, players who fit the identity of the team. Those things don't bother me, but I still think you can find those players and find players who have recognizable names. Like, you can do both, and they haven't quite done that yet.
Sure. And to be fair, the Bears were in the market for Robert Woods when he ended up going to Tennessee.
Is that confirmed? Were they?
He was, yeah, it was like the Bears, I want to say the Eagles, the Titans, obviously, because they ended up with them, and a couple other teams were involved, and they had called the Rams about Robert Woods, and his preference was to go to Tennessee or something like that. So it's not that they haven't been doing work. Now, the frustrating part is a lot of offensive linemen are coming off the board now, and that's what is more frustrating to Bears fans, because you have these unknown quantities in Larry Borum and Tevin Jenkins, and you let James Daniels walk to Pittsburgh. That's not the best, but you sign Lucas Patrick, who is going to be your center. He comes from Green Bay, so he knows Luke Getsy. That is very helpful. Obviously, he knows the offense, he knows the cues, and he's early. You don't have to just throw him in there in the middle of this training camp that comes up in a week or two for that teams with first-time coaches get. So that's helpful as well. Now, that probably means you see Cody Whitehair move back to guard. Arguable of if that's his best position or not. We'll see what happens there. But you need a couple more offensive linemen, and I think there's been a lot of Bears targets that, quote-unquote, that Bears fans have wanted to see them go after that have come off the board. And you're kind of wondering, okay, well, time to get a move on because the names you want are coming off the board. Like you said, Kevin, I still think there's time for them to do something. I think it shows that they believe in their evaluations, Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, that there's something there with Jenkins and Borum.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, like, I don't think this is a staff that's going to be like, hey, Jason Peters 1 week before the season. Like, I think they do believe in these younger players. And you could argue that Lucas Patrick, that signing, filled the biggest hole in the team. I mean, obviously our comments here have their opinions on that. I mean, he is going to play center for the Chicago Bears, and that was one of the weakest links on the team. That and cornerback, you could go back and forth, and they fulfilled that. And I really like, look, again,
well, I wouldn't say fulfilled.
Why?
Because you still need bodies. Like,
no. I'm just saying at that specific position. That's specific.
At center. At center specifically.
Like, you're good at center. You're straight away. And honestly, like, I'll go as far as to say, I think that Lucas Patrick signing is by far the best of free agency. I mean, I really do. I think he is a very, very underrated player. He was the third highest rated center on Pro Football Focus this past year. He is a violent player. And again, you talk about Ryan Poles and his background as an offensive lineman and what he said the moment that he got in Chicago is we need more fight from our players. We need more, and specifically from that position group. And that led everybody to that one moment of Tevin Jenkins when he started going back and forth with the Minnesota Vikings players after they hit Justin Fields out of bounds on Monday Night Football. You're getting a similar type player in Lucas Patrick, and you are building an offensive line that is nasty, that is relentless, and that is violent. And that's why, again, like, you can have your gripes and your critiques of this free agency. What you can say about each player is they have fit the identity that Poles and Eberflus have detailed. And if anything, that's what you want. Like, that is exactly what you want, because it's beneficial to both the player and the coach. The coach will be more willing to work with the player because they fit their system and they fit their identity. And the player will be more willing to work with the coach because they know that they have the same mentality towards the game. So I think Lucas Patrick is a very, very underrated signing. He's 28 years old. I think he has the potential to be a very, very good. I think he could be a Pro Bowl center. I do. I think, like, watching his tape, I think there is potential there. So I think that's the best signing of free agency. Let's go. We talked a little about Byron Pringle. Let's go back to Byron Pringle again, because I do. So the question I have for you before we detail on Byron Pringle is, what do you expect them to do now? Do you expect them to grab another like fringe wide receiver one, whether that be like a Julio Jones who's now available, something like that, or do they just bank on trying to get a David Bell, a Pickens from the draft, a Chris Olave somehow, some way? What's the approach now with the wide receiver room? Because that is the pressing question for Bears fans.
Yeah, I think it shows that they're looking, that the draft is really going to show that that's where they're going to look for their kind of guy to be the future number one at wide receiver. Byron Pringle, I said earlier, yeah, he's a great, you hope he has upside and you hope that he can turn into a high-end number two. Equinomia St. Brown, he's a fringe guy. He's really nothing there for you. And then you have Darnell Mooney and you have Daz Newsome, and Daz Newsome is an unknown quantity.
Completely
Darnell
unknown.
Mooney took a huge leap forward, and you hope that he can be a quality number one for you next year. So it shows to me that they're going to try and do something, whether that's a Pickens or an Olave, and we'll get to that, to be their future number one. We'll see. But I don't think, like, Julio Jones, I don't want any part of. I mean, I don't, because he's washed. He can't stay healthy.
Yeah, that's true.
When was the last time he played 10 games? Like, it's
long time.
You can't count on him. Why spend $15 million on a 1 year of Julio Jones when you
I don't think he would. He knows that
theoretically
he's not worth that much anymore.
I mean,
sure.
someone who's desperate will throw that money at him. So, I mean, if you want to chase Odell Beckham Jr., fine.
I would love
if you
that.
want it, like, yeah, and I mean, maybe that works, but he's already stated his desire to go to Cleveland. He's tweeting about other teams. So.
No, he is not going to Cleveland.
He said he'd want to go back. Did you not see that?
No.
He said now Cleveland with Deshaun Watson, he'd want to go. He would be open to going back.
Also, Julio Jones played 10 games last year.
And honestly, the Rams probably would love to have him back. I'm sure
they should.
He tweeted about someone else too, like, oh, they're building something over. I don't know, but
Chicago
regardless.
Bears.
So if you want to chase one of these guys, sure. I think it's probably going to come down to the draft, and maybe you see them sign some other kind of fringe guy. Jarvis Landry, didn't he sign somewhere else already? I don't know.
Not yet, no.
But I mean, yeah, maybe Jarvis Landry. I don't know. But I don't think it's going to be anything that makes you go like, wow. Like, I think Ryan Poles has been, unless someone falls, unless like it takes a long time and someone's price is dropping, and maybe Ryan Poles says, okay, here's an opportunity where we can get someone at a lower price than we thought, then yeah, maybe. But I am expecting, there's a lot of holes on this roster. You need a lot of warm bodies on this roster. There's a lot of guys. There's a lot of spots that need to be filled. So you have a lot of money that you got to throw around at a lot of different spots.
And that's why, like, I'm sitting here saying, like, I really like the approach of these young, talented players, but at some point you just have to fill position groups with bodies. And like, I wouldn't, and when it comes to the wide receiver position, specifically the situation that the Bears are in, when you have a rookie quarterback, I'm totally fine with going after that 33-year-old receiver who's going to be a safety blanket for Justin Fields, a guy who knows the game, a guy who's going to run his routes correctly, a guy who's going to be a leader I'm fine with that. Like, I like the idea overall, comprehensively, of going after the younger players. But if there's one position group where you should do it, it's that wide receiver position group, because you have a rookie quarterback. First of all, you just need bodies there. And I think having a veteran presence, a guy who is, just a disciple of the game, who knows what he's doing, who's going to be a support system for Justin Fields, is really, really important. And that's why, like, when you look at the free agent wide receivers that are still available, you think about an AJ Green, a T.Y. Hilton, Mohamed Sanu, Julio Jones, like Jarvis Landry. Those are guys that exactly fit that mold, So I think I wouldn't be surprised if, either, because a lot of those guys, quite frankly, like, if they haven't gotten signed yet, they might not get signed for another few months. Like, that's just how it happens. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if, hey, let's test our luck in the draft. All right, if we get Olave, we run with that receiving core. If we don't, we still get a receiver in rounds 2 or 3, and then we go after, a Jarvis or a Julio Jones. If you're going after them in May or June at that point, are probably going to be playing for less than $3 million. Like, you can do that, and I'm fine with that. So they need another piece, and I think it has to be a rookie and something else. Like, it can't just be a rookie. It has to be a rookie and another free agent signing. So I would expect the Bears to, at one point or another, pick up one other receiver, and if I had to guess, it will be a veteran presence. And, that was the approach, right, to offseason, was we are going to do everything we can to put Justin Fields in the best position possible. And how have they really done that so far? I mean, they've gotten Lucas Patrick, but outside of that, like Byron Pringle is a good piece, but more, you need more. And I really think that they are going to be, or I hope they're going to be, and they should be active in finding another offensive lineman who's available or one of those veteran wide receivers. So I guess it's just a waiting game now. We're past that initial rush of free agency where signings are happening every day. This could happen tomorrow. It could happen in the next 3 months. We just don't know, but it needs to happen, in my opinion.
What about Sami Watkins?
Sure. I mean, Sami Watkins is a super fast player. I would love that. He's 28, really. I would have thought Sami Watkins was a little bit older. Yeah, I mean, he's a player who hasn't really developed recently, but is an effective. Yes. Put him in the building. I would be fine with that.
I mean, he was in Kansas City when Poles was there.
Right.
So, I mean,
there's
a connection there.
There's totally connection there.
And we've seen that in all of these signings.
Right.
Just about every single one has had some kind of connection to Poles or Eberflus or one of the assistant coaches. So that clearly means a lot to them, why I think that you're going to see Trey Waynes get signed from Indianapolis in the near future. I mean, that's been a name that's been linked to the Bears since the start of free agency.
Is that not the biggest need right now? Cornerback?
No, it absolutely is. Because right now, Kindle Vildor is your starting outside corner again.
No, he's not. Thomas Graham is. And then I think, I don't know how that, I don't remember if Vildor was better in the slot when he played that. I don't even remember.
I mean, he always has been.
I don't want to remember anything.
Yeah, he did.
That Kindle Vildor did this past year. But, I mean, so let's go to the defensive side of the ball.
The point being, you have holes that you need to fill. You release Danny Trevathan. You release Tariq Cohen. You let Bilal Nichols walk to Vegas. You released Eddie Goldman. It's been bing, bang, boom. You released all these. You traded Cleomac. There's spots that you need to fill. You let James Daniels walk. You have, and I think Bears fans are just antsy. It's okay, and that's the thing. It's there's all these spots that need to be filled, and they haven't been yet, and it's been slow going. And obviously, all of the guys at the top were going to get signed right away and immediately. It's been 2 weeks. Has it even been that long? Yeah, it's been 2 weeks, right?
Not even. It's been 9 days or something.
All of these guys were going to get signed in rapid succession. That was always going to happen. The Bears were never going to be in the market. Yeah, of course, on this show, we talked about, getting a J.C. Jackson maybe in our wildest dreams. And yeah, maybe they will go for it and get someone at the tippy top of the free agent list. But the reality was always going to be that likely was not going to happen unless, somebody fell into their lap. And it didn't. So now you have the options to pick from these remaining guys of these Sami Watkinses, these Bobby Wagners, these Jarvis Landrys. Maybe you can convince Tyrann Mathieu to come to Chicago. That'd be a great piece.
There has been rumors there that the Bears are interested.
Sure. And if not, maybe it's a Landon Collins. Maybe it does end up being Trey Waynes. And maybe it does end up being someone that it doesn't exactly get you super fired up because they aren't as good as they used to be. But at some point, you are going to have to do that. And if they can, at some point, if it's a warm body and they can suit up on game day, that's going to be an ability that you want because you need those types of guys at this point.
And I wouldn't be surprised, if we see that happen in 2 weeks or whenever. It's Bears give Tyrann Mathieu crazy contract, or the Bears give Odell Beckham Jr. A crazy contract, and then we're okay, so this was the plan all along. We were going to get some of these depth fringe players who were going to be important pieces to the team, and then here's the player we're going to spend money on. It just didn't happen when we thought it would happen. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. If we find out tomorrow the Bears get Tyrann Mathieu on 3-year, $60 million contract or something, it's okay, that obviously that's a little steep. I'm just throwing numbers out there. That's okay, that makes sense now. So this was their their blockbuster player they're waiting to pay. It just happened to be that it took a little bit of time, or whether that be Odell Beckham Jr., whether that be whoever it may be. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. It's just, as fans, as evaluators, you want to see those names coming immediately. Free agency happens and it's a rush, and you see all these other teams getting big name players, and you're where's our place in this mess? Where are we? Where's all these guys coming to us? And sometimes it just doesn't happen with that timing. So that's why I don't want to say it's a waiting game, but it sort of is. It sort of is. And, man, now that you brought that up, that would although without the cornerback position being filled, like I would be ecstatic about that secondary with Tyrann Mathieu, Eddie Jackson, Jalen Johnson, and Thomas Graham. And I know it sounds like I'm hyping up Thomas Graham too much. No, I'm not. I think the guy's a really freaking good player, and I am comfortable with him as the starting outside cornerback at the beginning of 2022. Based off of what we saw in the final games of 2021, am I crazy for saying that?
Yes, you are.
I don't think I am.
I'm not going to Sharpie in Thomas Graham Jr. I agree with you. I was encouraged by what I saw from him. Encouraged. I'm not going to Sharpie in a 6th-round pick as your starting outside corner on March 23rd. You need to at least bring someone in to see how he does in training. Bring in a Joe Hayden, bring in somebody. Like you can't, I'm not Sharpieing in Thomas Graham Jr. I was encouraged. I agree with you. He showed a lot of promise. I'm not starting him based on promise showed in 3 games. Can't do it. Can't have it.
I mean, fine.
You have to, Kevin, you have to bring in a Trey Waynes or a Joe Hayden or whoever it is. I believe in him too. I think he could be good. But I'm not going to just base that off 3 games. Give me a training camp. Give me some practices. Give me some more game reps, and we'll go from there. Hell, put him in the slot. That's fine too. You still, regardless, you want Kindle Vildor out there on opening day on the first game of the season? No, you don't want that. So regardless, you need to sign another corner or 2.
Fair enough. I mean, Stephon Gilmore is out there. I mean, he's sort of washed up at this point. I would say washed up, but he's 31. And I don't know. I'd be fine with that. So I'm a believer in Thomas Graham. I am. And we could go back and forth on this, but I don't think there's any harm. Like, it's not, oh, he's a 6th-round pick, we can't trust him. Like, great. He's a 6th-round pick. You're paying him $800,000. I don't know how much you're paying him. But
it's the Sam Mustafa argument again.
No, it's a little bit different from Sam.
In the same vein of like, okay, you're getting what you pay for.
Value, right? You're getting incredible value out of it. But I mean, that's a player we should be encouraged by. But yeah, they need to be active there. Let's go at other moves on defense. The one that I really like, I am really, really infatuated with the Nicholas Morrow move. Sure. I think he is the perfect player for the Eberflus defense. What does he want? What did he tell all the players in his introductory press conference? Get your running shoes on. We're going to run. He's a very, very fast player. You're paying him $5 million for 1 year. He had 78 tackles last year, 3 sacks in only 14 games, only 26 years old. This reminds me of like a Nick Kwiatkowski type deal where he's going to come in, he's going to get a lot of playing time, and then he's going to play his way into a bigger contract next year for either the Bears or for another team. But, when you are playing next to Roquan Smith, you just got to be around the ball. You got to be present. You got to be quick to the football and, be able to get takeaways. And I think Nicholas Morrow is a player who can do that. I'm really, really excited about him.
Yeah, and I think his best year in Vegas came when they were running a 4-3 defense. Comes from the Rod Marinelli tree, which obviously Matt Eberflus comes from. So I agree with you. Right. I do like that signing as well. I think it's going to be strong. It's kind of to go back to one of the points you made in the beginning of the Bears in the past have had this habit of taking a swing on a guy who has some upside, but is like a Pernell McPhee. I think he was 28 when he was signed, and that was a 5-year contract. We haven't seen that yet. That was kind of going to be the Larry Ogunjobi signing. I think he was 27 or 26, and it was a 3-year contract. But I kind of like the cautious approach by Ryan Poles. Maybe part of that is because of your salary cap situation, and next year it balloons and you have all this freed up space. So even if Nicholas Morrow does have a breakout year like he had in, I think it was 2020, when Vegas was running that 4-3 and he had a career year, even if he does break out and has a great year, you can pay him next year easier than you can this year. Or maybe that is a Justin Jones, so you give him a contract extension or whoever it may be. I think that's kind of part of the mindset here. Let's go with these shorter deals, these 1-2 year deals, because in the next 2 years, we get a lot of space freed up and we'll still have Justin Fields on that rookie deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like a lot of these players as well, like as I'm looking through the stats and as I was doing my research, a lot of these players have like statistically gotten better each year in the league. Like they have showed development, and now, maybe, they developed and then boom, this is their breakout year. This is their year to really show out. They've gotten better, boom, breakout year incoming. Like you look at Nicholas Morrow, first year, 60 tackles combined, second year, 43, he went down, then he went up to 73, 78 tackles for loss. He went 5, 5, 2, and then he had 8 last year. all these. He had interception, a fumble recovery last year, like 3 sacks more than any he had in the first 3 years. Like these are players who are getting better, and you're finding players who have the ability to be breakout players that we're talking about. And that's what, when we go back to the initial conversation is, it's not Bobby Wagner. It doesn't have to be Bobby Wagner necessarily. Like I would love Bobby Wagner to be in the building, but this is a guy who is young, who showed promise and, could be on the brink of a breakout year. Like we expect we always forget that players can develop. Like we forget that in the first week of free agency. We forget that you find the player, you say, okay, boom, Nicholas Morrow, let's look at his stats. Well, he doesn't have the same amount of tackles as this guy, or it doesn't matter. What if he has the same amount next year? What if you have a coaching staff that is able to elevate and get the most out of their players? And that's something we're not used to as Bears fans in the past 4 years of Bears football is you didn't have a coach who could take a player like Nicholas Morrow or take a player like Byron Pringle and get the most out of them. You needed a guy who was established because you knew the coaching staff was unable to develop those players. But for some reason, I don't know if it's just blind optimism, I have more faith in this coaching staff.
Blind optimism? No, that never happens.
Yeah, those two things just don't go together, do they? This coaching staff, I have more optimism that they are able to get more out of their players. And I could be totally wrong. In 3 years, Eberflus could be walking out the door like, shit, I was wrong. But
and we'll do this all again. Jesus.
And then we'll do this all again. But I do think that what they've built gives us
God help this podcast if that
I know. God help us. God help this God help the city of Chicago. But I think they'll be able to get more other players. And Timothy Wire in the chat just said Dean from the Colts, and he's another guy. I mean, Al-Qaeda Muhammad last year, 6 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 48 tackles, 13 QB hits. Like those are productive numbers for a guy who I don't know. He was starting on the regular, but yeah, and Eberflus knows him. Again, there's that connection. But I mean, these are players, and we're gonna a lot of people, myself included, sometimes are gonna overlook these players. These are players you will see starting on Sunday. So you better get familiar with their names. You better get familiar with how they play the game. Al-Qaeda Muhammad.
I mean, most of the players the Bears have signed so far are going to be starters. I mean, Al-Qaeda Muhammad.
Justin Jones will be a starter. Well, unless Travis Gibson has a really good camp. I can see Travis Gibson starting over Al-Qaeda Muhammad, but sure, go ahead.
Okay, maybe, but and that would be ideal then in that situation. Lucas Patrick going to start. We talked about that already. Nicholas Morrow going to start. Talked about that already. So yeah, I mean, everybody that's been signed for the most part, outside of Kari Blasanyame today or yesterday, fullback. He's a fullback, obviously, and then Dakota Dozier. He's probably going to be a backup too, but for the most part, I mean, 6 out of these 8 guys or 8 out of 10. They're going to be starters already. So, yeah, it's like we mentioned earlier. They're not guys that you're like, oh, yeah, I know that guy. Oh, hell yeah, let's go. Doesn't mean they can't. Like we talked about earlier, a lot of these guys are 26, 27, 28. It's generally accepted that in the NFL, your prime spans from 26 or 27 until about 30, 31. So you're going about the process right if you're Ryan Poles.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one other thing about all these players in general that I've noticed is they play a lot of games. And I think that was really important given, the team in years past was, you had a lot of talented players, but value has to be evaluated as far as your availability. I mean, it does. If
availability is an ability in all pro sports.
I think the quote is availability is the greatest ability. And that's what they say. And again, we didn't do a full podcast on Cleomac. I did a live show with Justin. Jake was at work, but I think that was one of the main reasons they traded Cleomac. I mean, if not the reason was, look, you were a game breaker when you were on the field, but you weren't able to stay on the field. And for that reason, I'm not paying you $28 million this year because your value isn't there. And who knows? Maybe he'll play 17 games next year. Maybe he'll play 6. You just don't know. And you can't take that. You can't take that risk with the amount of money you're paying him. So I like the fact that they found players who are getting better and guys who stay on the field. And I think that's just really important. So
yeah, I mean,
what is this comment? 100% true, says Kevin. I bet you can't grow a beard like Jake. 100% true. That must be your name for a reason because that is 100% true. I cannot.
I promise that's not me.
No, yeah, you're burning.
To go back to the
comments.
To go to the Cleomac thing because obviously I wasn't around to talk about that at the time.
Yeah, what's your 2 cents?
I mean, you texted me outraged as soon as it happened. You're like, I can't believe
I was
it.
not. Was I? I don't think I was outraged.
You were a little hurt, and I get that. Obviously, and I texted you this at the time. Cleomac gave you his best year already for you. 2018.
Agreed.
And he had gotten worse every year. And you were never going to, because you were upset with the return. You were upset with the second round.
Initially,
pick.
I was upset, and I still am. I still think they could have gotten more.
And I disagree, because Cleomac wasn't ever going to get you back what you gave for him to the Raiders. To get a second round pick this year was always going to, that was good. Like that, for what he was, his availability on the field or lack thereof, his lack of game wrecking now. Like, there's a reason Robert Quinn is still on this team and Cleomac is not. That's just part of it. And maybe Robert Quinn goes. I don't know. Maybe Robert Quinn gets traded and they capitalize and sell high. I doubt it, because I think he could fit really well in this defense and be that game wrecker. But yeah, I mean, Cleomac, I was shocked, but also not really, because how many times did I say on this show in the weeks leading up to it, don't be surprised if Cleomac is not on this team next year?
I think, yeah, we both said that. And like
I said that, and you didn't want to believe me.
Did I? Are you sure?
Yes, I'm positive.
I am Scox, Timothy Wire. Y'all are here a lot. I need a fact check on that. But like, overall, real quick, for those who haven't heard it from me, I'm happy they traded Cleomac. I am. I think overall in the long run, you become a better football team.
It was time for both parties to go different ways.
Yeah, it was. Again, we talked about the value about staying on the field, and then, the money that they free up next year, they're going to have by far the most cap space in the league next year. And next year is the offseason that will prime you. You watch, you see what the Los Angeles Chargers are doing right now. Yep. J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, Mike Williams, big extension. That will be the Chicago Bears next year. Pencil it in. The Chicago Bears will be the Los Angeles Rams of last year. To be the Los Angeles Chargers of this year. Getting every possible player, because they're going to have $140 million in cap space. They can give however much money to whoever they want. All right.
Well, there are also other similarities there too. Quarterback going into his third year, head coach going into his second year. There are similarities there. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, and it made too much sense. And again, and quite frankly, Cleomac was a game wrecker. But when we came on this show many times, Jake, and we weren't the only ones who saw this. On Sundays, he wasn't always showing up. He wasn't always the one that was, putting pressure on the quarterback. Like, there was a lot of times last year where I asked myself, where is Khalil Mack? He is far too good of a player to not be, making an impact on the game, for the announcers not to be saying his name at all throughout a 60-minute game. And I don't know if that was due to injury. Khalil Mack is still one of the best edge defenders in the league, and I'm not going to argue against that. But from the standpoint of a viewer of the Chicago Bears, it was not, look, here's my $25 million edge rusher breaking the game every single second. So
right. He was a luxury you couldn't afford anymore.
Yeah, he wasn't. So this guy is
Since when are you in a professional studio?
This is my professional studio.
Yeah.
This is my professional studio.
Kevin Lapka, noted owner of a professional studio.
This
All
is
right, I guess I got
100% true. This is my apartment.
Yeah, I got to start doing shows from the score, I guess. But anyway, what were we talking about? Okay, so in that same vein of the trade and that, outside of the Khalil Mack move, what is the move that surprised you the most? And I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but proceed.
Surprised me the most?
Yeah.
I
either they cut said player or they just let him walk. Let's put that in there too.
I still think Eddie Goldman, honestly,
okay.
I didn't see a need for him to go. He didn't have the most productive season last year, but he's still a younger player. Yeah, but he's still a younger player. I still think he has potential. That one surprised me a little bit. I'm not upset about it, but I think that when I saw the notification, I was like, really? I wasn't pissed off, but I was like, same as Bilal Nichols.
That one surprised me more than the Eddie Goldman one.
Yeah, I mean,
that being said, this is that's kind of what happens with the new regimes. They didn't draft you. All right, see you. Good luck.
Yeah, we no allegiance to you. I mean, that's just how it goes. You want to bring, and I'm fine with that. You want to go bring in players who you want, who fit your system. That's great. You can do both. You have to do both. You have guys under contract, and you say, okay, we have these guys. We have to, fit our system to fit these guys. We have to, that's just what you have to do. But if you have guys who are, free agents who you don't have to resign, you don't owe them anything. If you don't want them in the building, let them walk. But it was still a little bit surprising to me. So what was the most surprising for you? I mean, Cleomac was not the most surprise for me, honestly. Like what I think I was
We knew
surprised
it was
over
a
the
possibility.
return, but yeah, we knew it was a possibility. What was surprising for you?
I was surprised by how quickly James Daniels walked. I didn't
Okay,
expect that to be as
yeah.
fast as it was.
Yeah.
And if it was that fast, I kind of expected the Bears to put up more of a fight.
Mhm.
I was still surprised by the Cohen's cut.
Not surprised at all. That's a good cut.
I was a little
Good cut.
surprised.
Great
Still,
cut.
I was a little surprised that the health. There's weird health things going on with him and that
It's
ACL
not about that.
recovery.
It's not about that.
So I was a little surprised when that came. Danny Trevathan we knew was going to happen. Eddie Goldman and Ball Nichols, I had a feeling that it was a possibility. But yeah, the James Daniels one, I think, was one that I was like, huh.
Yeah,
I was more surprised that happened as quickly as it did. If we were like now and James Daniels got signed, I'd be like, okay. But it was pretty fast. Like he went in the first couple days to Pittsburgh.
he wanted to be with his boy Mitch. All right, let him go be with his boy Mitch.
More power to you. Okay.
No, I think you're right. Real quick. Well, no, I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, I'm with you on that. So, Tariq Cohen, real quick, Tariq Cohen,
sure,
great cut. I love the guy to death. I have his Xbox from when he won a Fortnite tournament. I wanted to give away. I've talked to him a few times on Discord. Great guy. He's gonna be great with it, whatever team gets him. But we've talked on the show a million times, and we'll say it every episode. Running backs you can get a player equally as effective in undrafted. Right. I watched Master Teague from Ohio State today at the pro day. He's going to be undrafted, great name, one of the elite names of college football, who might just be just as effective. Khalil Herbert, boom, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like it does not matter. And for what you were paying him, that contract they gave him initially was just absurd. That contract that Ryan Pace gave him, but I'm totally fine with that cut. So,
well, he was still you considered him one of those potential game breakers. You were rewarding him for a career year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But whatever. Something that I think is underrated, real quick, just to wrap up the free agent, the re-signing of DeAndre Houston Carson. He's a special teams ace. I love that re-sign. Great. I think he's like, I honestly think he's going to be like your new Sherrick McManus, where he's just going to be around forever and be like that special teams ace. Then he fills in a pinch at corner or safety. So I love that. Before we get into talking about Chris Olave and what Kevin saw and talked to him about today, let's just do final grades on the offseason so far, and one thing that you're hoping for in the next couple weeks out of Bears free agency.
Yeah, so grade,
again, and then move you're looking for.
Yeah, so my grid is obviously skewed, right? Like I can't fully evaluate it because I think things will happen. But thus far, free agency, I'll give it a C. I mean, I think they've made some really, really good underrated depth signings that are going to be effective players next year. But I think there's more to be done. I think more could have been done. Like I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I think they could have been more active on certain players. Now, as far as what I think is going to happen, I think in the next few weeks, you're going to see them pay a little bit more for one of those veteran players. I think it could be Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. I think it could be Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, Sami Watkins, AJ Green, one of those guys. I think that could happen. And if I had to predict, I think it will happen. I think one of the things is Ryan Poles understands, what it means to be the GM of the Chicago Bears. Bringing in a player like that, bringing superstar. There's always a desire for that, how it would excite the fan base in the city. I think he'll be inclined to do it. Again, I don't know if it's me anything crazy. Honey Badger would be the number one for me, but if it's anyone else, Julio, Jarvis, Sami Watkins, I think that's going to happen. But to you now, what is your grade?
Yeah, I'll go with C+. I think that in the fallout of the Ogunjobi failed physical, I think I was impressed with Ryan Poles, how quickly he moved following that failed physical. I was impressed with failed the physical, but here's Justin Jones on a 2-year deal.
Right.
And that was impressive to me because at times we saw Ryan Pace and we complained about how he took too long to make things happen sometimes and how he was kind of just always working in and it was really back to back. I feel like it was the Schefter tweets basically came like one after the other. Larry Ogunjobi failed his physical. Bears aren't going to sign him. Okay, the Bears also, though, are signing Justin Jones 2-year deal. I thought that was very impressive. I think that speaks to the type of GM that Ryan Poles is and how he's going to operate. Okay, here's a problem. Okay, something didn't go wrong. All right, let's address it immediately. Boom, here we go. We still have this position taken care of. Let's move on. I thought that was very impressive, and that's why, I still think there's more to be done, like you said, Kevin, but I give it a C+, borderline B-, honestly.
Okay.
Because
That's
just
loftier
because
than
of the
most.
guys, like we've talked about for the past 45 minutes. The guys that you're taking these shots on are good, entering or in their prime. Pringle, Jones, Morrow, like you're taking shots on the right guys who hopefully a couple of them pop. Then maybe it's let's say for the sake of argument, it's Pringle and Morrow pop and they earn extensions or second contracts, the 2 or 3 year deals after the season. Then we look back on this free agent class as with flying colors and we give it an A+ at that point. So I've appreciated Ryan Poles, how quickly, and the guys he's picked, because like you said, he's not taking these guys that are washed. Now, what I would like to see going forward, I think you need to sign a Trey Waynes or Joe Hayden. They're a little bit older.
CB.
Waynes is about to be 30. Hayden's 32, but position of need, beggars can't be choosers. And then now that I said it, I like the idea of Sami Watkins on the Bears.
Yeah.
He has a ring. He's been like, he's worked with Patrick Mahomes. He was with Poles in Kansas City. I really like the fit there. I think Sami Watkins, he's probably not a number one, but to lead the room with Darnell Mooney and Byron Pringle and Daz Newsome, I think you could do way worse than that. I don't want anything to do with Julio Jones and what he is now. Jarvis Landry, I could maybe be talked into, but I think Sami Watkins is someone I would really like to see in a Bears uniform going forward.
Yeah, I'm all in on that, man.
All right, let's wrap it up talking about Kevin went to Ohio State's pro day today, was being a big J journalist. Very proud of my son. Talked to Chris Olave, put out a video on Twitter, asked him, of course, about Justin Fields. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so, I for those listening, I go to Ohio State. I didn't
here.
travel to Columbus from Chicago for, just to talk to Chris Olave. I go to Ohio State, so I was fortunate enough to get a credential to that. And, first thing I noticed right when I walked in, scouts got there about 30 more minutes before I did, so I didn't get a chance to see any of the Bears scouts walk in. But, I walked in, I immediately was out there searching for, anyone with a Bears jacket on, a Bears logo anywhere. And right when I walk in, Tyke Tolbert, Bears passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach, is talking to Chris Olave from the start, like before workouts even started. He's talking there, chatting with him. I was like, okay, that's significant. And like, before, I do this whole spiel, like people need to understand that, like it's sometimes overlooked, but sometimes it's not. Like I tweeted this out. Remember last year, there was the image of Matt Nagy standing next to, I think maybe it was Mike Vrabel, and right in the middle was Ryan Day at last year's pro day. And look exactly what happened last year. The Bears drafted there is significant value to, a Bears scout being there, specifically the wide receivers coach, and him discussing and conversing with a player. So I thought that was significant. But yeah, so, after the workouts were done, we had some stand-up interviews with Chris Olave, and I asked him, I was like, you were talking to Tyke Tolbert a little bit, you're talking with the Bears. What would it be like for you to reunite with Justin Fields in Chicago? And before he said anything, like the biggest smile came on his face. If you want to see the video, it's Kev Charles 112 on Twitter. It's got about 35,000 views because Bears fans are just, they want it to happen. But the reason why I found that significant, like, I don't know if I'm reading too much in emotions here, but this isn't the first time Chris Olave has gotten that question. Like right. If you, like, he's gotten that question from other Bears people who have, interviewed him in any other setting. But for him to have that, initial just reaction of smiling, and then he said, man, that's my guy. He said, it would be great. The specific quote from the Twitter was, that would be huge to link up with him again, period. We'll see what happens throughout the process. He is clearly, like, obviously this is a position where Chris Olave has no determination on whether he's going to go to the Bears. He has no influence on that. He, a team's going to draft him. This isn't free agency. He doesn't get to choose where he's going to go, but he sounds very, very content and appealed to the idea of being linked back up with Justin Fields. And if I had to guess, that's been expressed to Tyke Tolbert. That's been expressed to the other Bears scout that was there in their conversations. And that should make the Bears, and if they have that piece of information, that should make them more inclined to say, hey, he really wants to come back with Justin Fields. Is it worth it for us to package a few picks together, move up to the front of the first round and get him? And I think that's totally possible. So, and he had a really good workout too. Like he looked really, really good. He made a really good, arms out catch on the deep post route. He looked really good. And I do think, like, a lot of the replies to that tweet are, no way, there's no shot. It's not going to happen. Two things can happen. He could fall, which is completely possible. Things happen on draft day that you never expect. Who would have thought Justin Fields was going to fall that far? I mean, I did because I mocked it. But I think I mocked us trading up to 8 instead of, 12 for him, people are going to fall. But if he doesn't fall, you have to go up and get him. And here's the scenario that I think could play out, Jake. The Green Bay Packers have now lost Devontae Adams, and the bigger piece, Equanimeous St. Brown. They've lost both of them. They're in a prime position at pick. I think they're pick 22. They're in a prime position to take Chris Olave. I would not at all be surprised if the Bears somehow packaged up picks to move up to pick 21 ahead of them to steal Chris Olave from them and steal that from your division rival, because they're going to be interested in him. And why not go ahead and take him away from your division rival? So I think it's possible. And just hearing that from Chris Olave today, talking to him, it's too good to be true. It's too perfect to be true. So I hope it happens, but it's going to take some work.
I am going with the head thought that George Pickens is going to be a Bear in the second round, just because Olave, like you said, he's not going to get past the Packers there at 22. Like, it's just not like they need him more than he needs them. And it's a matter of getting Aaron Rodgers that weapon finally. And here's
finally,
the thing, though.
They've had Devontae Adams.
Well, you know what I mean. Like finally picking a player in the first round that can actually help Aaron Rodgers is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
Finally picking an offensive player that isn't a backup quarterback in the first round. And here's part of that equation too. The Bears don't have a lot of picks. Yeah, you got that extra second round from the Chargers. You should use that to take multiple bites at the apple, because you're going to have to use both those second rounders to move up into the first round, especially that far. Would a trade up for Olave work? I think it'd take both twos to move up to 21 or 20 from 38 or whatever it is.
Really,
it's a big jump. Really big jump. And then you're stuck from pick 22 or 21 or 20 to 71. That's a long time. And then you only have 2 5th rounders and a 6th. Like, the Bears, what we've seen, you're in this position because Ryan Pace was cavalier with his draft picks and was trading draft picks left and right. Anthony Miller, Tevin Jenkins, David Montgomery. Like, eventually you got to take as many bites as the apple as possible. We talked about how many holes are on the Bears roster. You can't really afford to make that big of a jump, especially if you think a talent like Pickens is going to be there for you to draft when he comes around at 39. Like, if you think Pickens is going to be there,
right? Like,
I'm not saying George Pickens is Chris Olave. Not saying that at all. And I'm not saying George Pickens can't be Chris Olave.
Sure.
I'm not saying that one's going to be better than the other. I can't see the future. I don't know those guys' games as well. Who knows where they'll end up. But I mean, Pickens is seen as one of these top receivers in this draft class. And if you think you can get him at 39, I think you got to wait, because you got to take as many bites at this as you can, especially when you're in a position where you only have 2 picks inside the top 50.
It does scare me to lose both those second round picks, and the reality of that, because oftentimes if you draft well enough, both your second round picks can be equivalent to first round talent. Like, that is a very common thing. But the reason why I think this is such a strong possibility and why I don't think this is smoke is, I attended every single Ohio State football game this year. I saw Bears scouts at a number of the games. This is back in the fall. And, I talked to the scout a little bit, and I came up to him and I talked to him for a little bit, and he asked me, who should I be looking at today? I said, obviously I'd be looking at, Chris Olave, and at the time, Garrett Wilson, before his draft stock rose. And he was like, yeah, I agree. Like, they have had their eye on Chris Olave for a very long time. And then sending your wide receivers coach there, that's significant. Talking for as long as they did.
You also have to do your homework. In the event that there is a slide, and in the event that, he does fall past the Packers, like if he slides to 30 or 31, then you make the jump. Then you take that extra 5th rounder and you say, all right, we'll jump up a little bit.
And the Packers are such the type to just take like some random ass guy from nowhere, like they're going to do that. That's what.
Or maybe they like Pickens more or something weird. Look what it took last year for you to get Fields. It took the Broncos and the Panthers, and I mean the Lions. I get why they took Sewell, but like the Panthers and the Broncos specifically, like it took huge mistakes by those guys for Fields to be able to fall to you. Maybe something weird like that happens again, but you can't bank on it.
DK Metcalf, right? Like it just happens.
Right.
DK Metcalf, it's a second round pick. Justin Jefferson, like some team took Jalen Reagor instead of Justin Jefferson. Like that's like I could see a team just being like George Pickens, like screw it. You know why? Like people have their evaluate. Like
there's different evaluations of different players.
Yeah, it could totally happen. So and you know Timothy Wire said, how about Garrett Wilson? Garrett Wilson's gonna be a top 10 pick. Timothy Wire, he's the best wide receiver in the draft. He looked unbelievable in pro day today. He is going to be a freaking superstar. But you know, I again, to go along with that, as we close on Olave, the recency bias of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase is very
everyone
real,
wants
in
to
my
recreate
opinion.
that now.
It's very real. I mean, you can't, like, that is a connection. Like, if you can, I mean, we talk so much on the show when we get into training camp, and especially last year, right? Was, oh, you know, where's the rapport between Justin Fields and Allen Robinson? Like, they got no time in training camp together. You know, oh, they're not having connection because you're not with each other the whole time. Okay, you walk in day one, boom, I've worked with this guy for 2 years. Boom. That's unique. So it's special.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I hope that, you know, okay, not sure. Anyway, Kevin has to make sure his apartment doesn't burn down. But yeah, I mean, Chris Olave, obviously we'd all love to see it, but you know, it is what it is. It's probably not going to happen. So you set your eyes on guys like George Pickens. I just think you need as many bites as the apple as you can get at this thing. And that's what happens. That's what shot Ryan Pace in the foot. So we'll see what happens. There's so much time. You know, Kevin, while you're gone, I was saying there's so much time for this thing to change. Robert Quinn might get traded. I don't think he will, but he might. And then you get a couple, like Robert Quinn's worth at least a second round pick, if not more.
I don't think so.
We'll see. I mean, he came off a record breaking year, so we'll see what happens. But this thing could change. And the part of it is that, you know, it's going to be more in free agency. And then those will change your needs. You'll add more offensive linemen. You'll add more corners. You'll add more receivers. And there might be more trades. Who knows? I mean, you might trade, who did I just say? Robert Quinn. You might trade Eddie Jackson. You might trade who knows who. Like, there's guys. Yeah, right. I mean, doubt it at this point, but it's all going to change. So we will be here as those things change, as people get signed, as trades happen, because more people are going to get signed. Trades, who knows? And as the draft gets closer, and then there's going to be in 2 weeks, right? I think it's the second week of April. There's going to be a mini camp, which is held for teams with first-year coaches. So we'll have that to go off of. Doubt everyone will be there. Maybe Justin Fields is there. I'm sure he will be because he wants to get to know his head coach and his play callers. So he'll probably be there. And we'll still talk about then. This is going to be rapidly and fluidly changing. And we're going to talk about it. So keep coming back. Keep listening. Keep watching. We appreciate that when you do. We love the comments. We love everything. Go heckle Kevin on his tweet. Who cares?
Go after me.
Yeah.
And
he deserves it. It's fine.
I have one more thing before we head out. As just watching free agency unfold around the rest of the league, and really, this has been the craziest offseason of all time. I mean, what the hell is going on? I mean, Tyreek Hill wants out, which I think is terrible for his career. He is not
Tyreek Hill's gone.
Player.
Tyreek
I know.
He's
gone.
Now.
Yeah, it's terrible for his career. He is not going to be the same player. Do not draft Tyreek Hill in the first or second round of your fantasy football draft. I'll tell you that right now. But the thing that I've noticed, and it's unbelievable, and it's kind of, you know, kind of annoying because Tom Brady's back in the NFC. I mean, the NFC is wide open.
Yep.
It is wide freaking
Why
open.
do you think Tom Brady came back?
Right. He's like, oh, shit. You know, but like
cakewalk to the Super Bowl.
All of the quarterbacks are just in the AFC. Deshaun Watson could have gone to 2 NFC teams. He could have gone to the 3 Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints. Nope. He chose the Cleveland Browns. Russell Wilson, you know, boom, went away. You know, the Seahawks would never have traded him in the conference, I don't think anyway. But when you I'm not going to sit here tell you right now that the Bears are going to make the playoffs. I'm kind of looking at this in more of like a long-term view. There is every ability for Justin Fields to be the premier quarterback in the NFC for years to come. I mean,
sure.
I am so glad I am not a fan of the team in the AFC, because I don't know how the hell year after year you're going to get to the AFC Championship with Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, that boy Mitch Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, all of those guys in the same conference. Yeah. Matt Ryan, who can play. It is just absurd. Like, I just had to say that because
no, you're right.
I'm thankful our team is in the NFC. That's
all.
And
I mean, and let's say the Bucs win the Super Bowl this year and Brady retires, goes out on top like he wants to. Then all you have to deal with is another year older Rodgers, another year older Stafford, So that's just, we talked about the Robinson thing. Go back and listen to the last episode. That was never going to happen ever again. That bridge was so far burned. Anyway, but as things happen, we'll come back. We'll talk about it. We're going to keep breaking the stuff down, keep breaking the Bears down, because that's what we like to do. And we do that for you guys because we care about you. And we know you at least somewhat like listening to what we have to say at some point. Maybe not the whole time, but at some point. So we appreciate that. And we appreciate you guys coming back and listening and watching as much as you do. So as things happen, we'll be back. So stay tuned. We will have stuff as it happens. But until then, we will talk to you next time. For Kevin Lapka and myself, this has been Bears Nation Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bear down.
Bye.